Hey now, today I'm going to be making some back bacon, or as people outside of Canada might call it, Canadian bacon. And for that, I'm going to be using half of this pork loin that I got on sale. And this is a really easy recipe as long as you've got the supplies to cure it and a way to smoke it afterwards. So let's dive in and see what we need here. So to start off with here, I've got this, like I said, a half of a pork loin. This came in at 1.716 kilograms, and I'm going to use this entire thing. The other half of this pork loin was a little bit thicker and a little bit more consistent, so I'm going to use that for a different dry-aged piece of charcuterie that I'm really excited about. It doesn't matter to me if this starts out a little thicker and gets thinner by the end, because it's all going to be sliced up for bacon in packages anyway. I'm also not worried that there's kind of a little cut here. I'm also not going to be cleaning off any of the fat, because I do like to have just a little ribbon of fat around the edges there with this back bacon, because it helps make it so it's not quite as dry, which is definitely a risk when you're talking about a super lean piece of meat. So that's the meat. Let's take a look at the cure. So for the cure, I'm starting off with 0.25% of cure number 1. This is a good cure for some of these shorter term cure scenarios. I'm not dry aging this or anything in the curing chamber, so this will be perfect. It's important to use a really accurate scale because you don't want to accidentally overdo that cure. If you can run into some health concerns. So going with that, then I've got 2% of a nice brown sugar, 2% of this is just pickling salt. You could also use kosher salt for this. And then 0.5% peppercorns. You could use just ground pepper, but I'm going to fire this into this spice grinder here, and I just kind of prefer the whole peppercorns. So I'm going to actually put those in right now, and then I'm also going to throw in this pickling salt. It's a little bit larger, so by doing this, it'll help that salt perhaps distribute a little bit more evenly over the meat. So just give it a quick grind here. There we are. We've got this. I'm going to add that into my sugar. I'm going to fire in my cure here as well. And then I'm going to carefully mix it all up so it is as even as possible. I like to use a fork for this because of that brown sugar. It helps. If it is trying to clump up at all, it really helps bust that up. Get it nicely distributed. And once this is all completely mixed, I'm going to go ahead and get this onto the pork loin. All right, so as always, I'm using my meat tub in order to get these spices on here, because that way I can just splash this on, and I'm not super concerned about splash off onto my counter or losing any of this, especially because that cure is weighed out, and it's important to get all of it into there. So I'm just going to give this an initial coating, and then I'm going to track down one of my children to give me a second pair of hands so that we can get all of this into a vacuum seal bag. All right, so I've got my pork loin. I'm going to set it in narrow side first because that's the easiest, nicest way to slide it in there. And then I'm going to get all of the remaining cure, this dry cure, into here. That way we're not missing any of that cure number 1. I'm just going to quickly wash up my hand here, and we can vacuum seal. So with this vacuum bag, I've double sealed the bottom, and I'm going to wind up double sealing the top here as well, just to make sure that there's no chance that anything leaks out. For the record, you can also use Ziploc bags if you wish. This one I probably then would have cut into 2 pieces just so it would fit nicely in one of those 1-gallon Ziploc bags. Or you can buy the really big ones, but they're quite a bit more expensive. But this way you're really guaranteed that nothing's going to leak out, which is nice. So let's go ahead and vacuum seal. So I'm just going to wait a sec and then give us the second seal on here just so it's perfect. But it's really nice because then I can toss this into the fridge in the basement, and I'm just not worried at all. I can go ahead, give it nice massages every day, and just really help work all that spicing and the cure into the meat. So there we are. So in addition to the actual product, which I'm calling back bacon, and the weight, I've got the date on here for March 5th. That way I won't forget when I started this, and I'll know when to pull it out. I'm going to give this probably a nice month in here, which will be lots of time for the the pepper and the sugar and everything to work its way into that meat. So like I said, every day or so I'm going to come in here, probably flip it around, give it a little sensual massage, and just wait for a month. All right, so after actually 4 weeks of letting this just kind of cure and get those flavors into it, I'm going to quickly just rinse it off prior to getting onto the smoker. So just rinsing off any excess stuff here that would fall off anyway. A little rub down. Perfect. There we go. So I'm just going to pad this dry now and let it kind of just sit on the rack in the smoker before I fire it up. All right, so I've just set it out here on my Pit Boss 700 FB. Up on the top rack, I'm going to leave the lid open here and just sort of let it air dry a little bit more before I fire it up. So I've got the back bacon here. I've got a probe thermometer inserted. I'm going to take it up to around 140 Fahrenheit. I don't want to cook it too much. And I've also got a water pan underneath it here just to help ensure a little bit of steam occurs. Again, I'm trying not to dry this out too much, especially since it's going to be cooked again, obviously, at serving time. So I'm going to let this go just on the smoke setting here for a little bit before I turn up the heat just a bit. So after 2 hours of smoking, this is starting to look beautiful, and my internal temperature is sitting at 95 Fahrenheit, so I'm just going to turn this up to my lowest setting of 200 degrees and going to let it keep doing its thing. So after an hour and a half of that 200 degrees, I was at 135, and then I actually just switched this back to smoke, and after about half an hour, we're at 138, so I'm just switching this off right now. I'm going to let this sit. I'm sure it'll rise up to 140 and I'll be able to pull it. So this beautiful bacon did in fact peak at 140, and I just let it kind of cool down for a few hours here, and now I'm just going to loosely tent this with a little plastic wrap and fire it in the fridge until tomorrow, at which point I will slice. So after off-gassing last night, I'm just going to slice this in half and take a look at it here. So that looks beautiful. It still looks like it's nice and moist, but it definitely firmed up. When I make just my regular hams out of pork loin, the texture is considerably different and softer because it hasn't been cooked yet when I package them, but this should be pretty stellar. So now it's time to slice. So I'm just going to give this a rip here on my Avantco slicer. Figure out the thickness I want. All right, so going on 1.5, that's a little bit thin. Let's maybe try it on 2 here. There we go. I'd say that's a pretty great thickness here for this back bacon. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and slice this all up. So there we go. Got it all sliced up. So now it's time to package. So I'm just going to vacuum seal these with my food saver here. And doing that will just allow these to freeze super nicely and not get freezer burnt, and they'll store for quite a long time in the freezer, which is perfect. So after I got everything all packed up here, I wound up with 6 packages of these 10 packs and then 6 packages of these 6 packs, which will be nice for smaller little situations, and then 1 pack, these sort of little more off-cut kind of pieces. And I'm probably going to have to fry up some of that and try it out. All right, it is the next day, and I finally had a little bit of time to play around with some pieces of this back bacon. So, oh yeah. I'm doing this left-handed in case you can't tell. I'm just going to flip these, heat them up just a little bit, and have a taste test. One of the keys here is not to
cook it too terribly crispy because as it's made from pork loin, it can dry out pretty quickly. So just going to get it nice and hot and on the verge of crisping up, and then give it a try.
Oh yeah, check this out. Beautiful, beautiful bacon. Getting some of that smoke from that Vermont Castings competition blend, those pellets that we used. I like using that 2% salt with the back bacon or the Canadian bacon here because I find I don't want it too terribly salty. There's not a lot of fat to kind of help balance that out at all. And it works really nicely with that 2%. And there's just like the barest hint of sweetness to it from that brown sugar. And then definitely a little bit of that black pepper in there too. So really simple recipe, really simple flavors, but I think that's exactly what this what the pork loin calls for here. So. All right, sweetheart, what do you think?
Good job.
Yeah, that'll do?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Yeah, love it. Really easy to do. Hope you give it a whirl, and until next time, keep her at 11.